Welcome to Armchair Expat, the podcast meant to get you out of your lazy boy and into your new life abroad. I'm Shannon Acton, founder of Bargain Homes Abroad, and I'm riding shotgun as we chase the dream of life beyond borders. Each episode, we'll hear stories from people who've left their comfort zone to explore the world. They'll share their highs, their lows, and their in-betweens, all meant to lovingly light a fire under your bum, so you can stop dreaming about it and start living it. So if you're stuck in your comfy recliner, scrolling through dreamy destinations, wondering what if, it's time to swap that raggedy old armchair for a one-way ticket. Let's freaking go, people. In this episode, I'm joined by Stacy Ennis, a best-selling author, book coach, and host of the Beyond Better podcast. Stacy's lived in 4 countries outside the U.S., including the Dominican Republic, Vietnam, Thailand, and now calls Portugal home. What I loved most about this conversation is Stacy's honesty about the real challenges of moving abroad. The visa headaches, the cultural adjustments, even the tough family moments, and how she's built a thriving, location-independent career along the way. Stacy has ghostwritten for a Nobel Prize winner, led a magazine that reached 11 million readers, and now helps leaders turn their ideas into books that make an impact. If you've ever dreamed of moving abroad, but wondered whether you're truly cut out for it, this episode will give you both the inspiration and the reality check you need. Let's jump in. But wait, I want to let you know that this episode is actually sponsored by Money Corp. Moving abroad is exciting, right? But if you've ever tried to transfer money internationally, you know it can feel anything but simple. The fees pile up, the exchange rates aren't always in your favor, and sometimes you're left wondering if your money even landed where it was supposed to. That's where Money Corp comes in. For over 40 years, they've been helping people, whether it's expats, property buyers, retirees, move their money across borders with less hassle and at a much better rate than most banks. What I love about Money Corp is that it's not just a faceless platform. You can actually talk to someone who understands what you're doing, whether that's making a one-time purchase like buying a house or setting up regular transfers for life abroad. Your dedicated Money Corp representative will even walk you through everything, help you time your transfers smartly, and save you money along the way. The best part? Opening an account is free, quick, and easy. And I've included a link in the show notes so you can set up yours today in just minutes. Thank you, Money Corp. Hello, Stacy. Welcome to the Armchair Expat podcast. I'm so glad you're here.
Shannon, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just dive right in. Tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll get into your background and where you're from.
Sure. Well, I live in Portugal, which I know is the main topic of our conversation today. And this is our 4th country that we've lived in outside of the US. So started in the Dominican Republic, moved to Vietnam. This was all before kids. Lived in Thailand with our kids and then moved to Portugal. I am a book coach and author, so I guide people through the transformative journey of authorhood. I specialize in nonfiction. And I've gotten to move that work around the world with me, which is pretty awesome and incredible. And I guess that's the crux of it. I have 2 kids, husband, and we live in southern Portugal.
So where did you grow up? Where are you from originally?
I'm from Boise, Idaho, and I lived there until I graduated college, and we moved to the Caribbean right after that.
Did you always have a dream to move abroad? Was that always the goal growing up?
No, it was because of a boy, which is my husband. Growing up, I read a lot, and I always had this dream to move to New York. And I read The Babysitter's Club. That was like my favorite book series that I read and reread a bunch as a kid. And one of the characters was named Stacy, which is also my name. And she was from New York. And there's this one book that's where Stacy goes to New York, and it's like one of the super special editions. And I would reread that book over and over. And I always told my parents, when I grow up, I'm moving to New York. And I don't know if it was like really New York. It was just the idea of getting out of Boise and going somewhere really exciting. And so I met my husband in college, and he had just done the like white guy backpacking trip through Asia, 6 weeks. He was back. He was like, just like totally transformed from this this experience. And yeah, I thought it was very exotic. And he had decided in his travels in Asia that he wanted to move back to Asia. And it was very dramatic because we met and very quickly fell in love, but like he was leaving in a few months. And we had these months where it was like, oh, he's going to leave, but I'm in love with him. And then he decided to stay for graduate school, but he made me agree. I mean, I could have not, but he said, okay, here's the deal. I'll stay for graduate school, but you have to move abroad with me after. And I said, okay. So I finished my undergrad. He finished his grad degree, and then I stayed true to my word, and we moved to the Dominican Republic after that. So growing up, I only ever went to Canada and Baja California, Mexico. That's it. I had never gone anywhere else, and even when I went to those places, one was on a cruise, and I only got off for the day in Mexico, and the other in Canada. I mean, barely saw it. I really had no international travel experience, and even really hadn't flown that much. We're Americans, we drive a lot. So a lot of driving trips to Oregon, California, I really hadn't traveled a lot. So it was a huge, huge thing to then move to Santo Domingo right when I graduated college.
How did you guys choose Santo Domingo?
We put out applications all over the world for teaching jobs. I have my bachelor's is in writing. I eventually went and got my master's in writing as well, but at the time I had just graduated with my bachelor's, and my husband has a master's in education. So we looked for teaching jobs, and originally we thought we would end up teaching English, as a lot of, college graduates do, to move abroad. But I ended up getting a high school language arts teaching job at a private school in the Santo Domingo, and my husband got a first grade teaching job at the same school. So we had a lot of, potential places. We basically just wherever gave us a job is where we're going to go. And that ended up being the best option that came forward from all of our applications.
Okay, so let's talk about your first move then. Like, how was that? The process, how was planning and preparation, and then how was assimilating?
Oh, yeah, it's interesting because it's just so different when you're in your 20s compared to, when you're in your 30s, late 30s, moving to a new country. In my 20s, it was very much a sell everything. I think I had two suitcases when we moved. Assimilation was easier in some ways, I think, when I was younger because I didn't have the responsibilities of parenting. Language was a lot easier to learn. Spanish is so much easier to learn than Portuguese. I also was going out at night. I was going to dance and have beers and do different things that I don't do any of that anymore. And so it was easier. It was just altogether easier in that way. It was also harder in the sense that where we lived was really dangerous. In fact, when we lived there, um, the Dominican Republic, the World Health Organization, I think, had just put out a list of the most dangerous countries in the world for foreigners, and it was number one at the time, the
Mm.
literal top of the list. And so just that kind of fear of violence, of death constantly was really scary and something that I really struggled with coming from blase, safe Idaho, where like nothing major really happened at the time. So that was really tough. But from a language standpoint, it was pretty easy-ish to learn Spanish with some classes and hanging out with people. And then also I had a job that took care of all my visa stuff, which I really learned that is very helpful later when we moved to Thailand and then to Portugal. It's a real bonus to have that help.
Well, why don't we talk about that a little bit? So, your next move was then Vietnam after that. Was that for teaching as well? And was that a direct, or did you come home in between?
Yeah, we did come back to Idaho for a little bit because actually training was in Seattle. So we came back, did some training in Seattle, and then we went to Vietnam after that. I loved living in Vietnam, and I love Asia in general. I will definitely, probably when the kids are in college, we'll go back and live in some Asian countries for periods of time. I love living in Asia. Um, but we weren't there that long. We were not even there a full year. And I
Mm.
applied for graduate school while I was there. So then we came back so I could go to graduate school and stayed for 8 years in the US. But again, that was the visa paperwork was through the school. We didn't have to do
Hmm.
any of that. When I had to manage it, the first time was moving to Thailand, which was, 8 years later after we came back to the US, which was very interesting to
And by
navigate.
that time, you also had children, right? So that was a
Yes.
different kind of process of moving. So let's talk about that a little bit. When you're deciding to move, you have a family established, and you're going through the visa process. How was that different? And then how did you approach it?
Well, it's really interesting sometimes looking back at pictures. My kids are 10 and 12 now. And when I look at pictures of our family, we have this picture of us with all of our suitcases behind us. It's at the Boise airport getting ready to go to Thailand. My kids are so small. And I
Mhm.
often think, what were you thinking moving to Thailand with these tiny children? They were 3 and 5, just so little. And, the visa paperwork was really hard in Thailand. I think a lot of that was because they're not very welcoming for foreigners to stay there long term. There's a lot of hoops, and you actually built into the system, you have to bribe people to get things
Mm.
through. And we didn't really understand that when we came there. And it's not really a system I prefer to, slip money into paperwork, but that's how everything works there. And so it was pretty annoying because we would have to leave every 3 months to do what's known as a visa run. So we did get some cool trips in. We went to Singapore, we went to Vietnam, visited our old place that we lived. But the paperwork process was really tough. And I think anybody considering moving to that part of the world, just be sure that you follow every single rule exactly and then some. So we made a big mistake. And when you moved to Thailand at the time, you had to put the equivalent of $10,000 in a bank account, and you couldn't touch it at all. So you put it in this account and you had to keep it for like, I don't remember if it was like 3 months or 6 months, something like that. And I don't remember why, but we accidentally withdrew like the equivalent of $100. So it just, for one, not even a full day. When we realized what happened, we went in that same day and we put the money back in, but it dipped for like 6 hours maybe. And they denied our visa because of that when we went in for visa paperwork. It's just those kinds of things that I think a lot of Americans, they don't really respect the bureaucracy. And I know I kind of had this attitude of like, oh, everything will just work out and it'll be fine. And that's just it's not how it works in bureaucratic countries. You have to follow all of the rules and you have to overfollow it sometimes. So really what we should have done is never even access that account at all, and until we had our visas in hand. If I could do it again, that's what I would do. Just making sure that like you really are careful with all of that stuff. So when we had one child in school, so we were able to do an education visa where the child has the visa and then the parent follows with, I can't remember what the specific term was. But then um, I toyed with the idea of doing a Muay Thai visa because it just seemed like a little easier than like if you take Muay Thai classes, you can get a visa with that at the time. But I ended up signing up for Thai classes. And so I got an education visa as well. And then I can't remember what we were doing for my husband. I think he was like following mine, but none of them went through, only my
Mm.
daughters. And it ultimately, we had a lot of problems in Thailand. It was a very, very, very difficult place to live for us. So that wasn't the only reason that we left after like 9 months, I think, 8 or 9. No, I think it was 10 months. Um, but it contributed because it was just, we're constantly at immigration. We're constantly having to book flights, constantly worrying that if I traveled for work, I wouldn't be able to come back in. So it just was stressful. And coupled with some of the other challenges we had there, um, it didn't ultimately work for us. So we ended up looking for a place that was a better fit, that was safe and um, just easier for us in a lot of ways. And started with Spain because of our Spanish background. And then that was kind of difficult with the visa. So we ended up with Portugal as our kind of second choice. But now I'm so glad that it ended up that way.
Can we go back to Thailand just a little bit and say
Sure.
what was the draw to Thailand? And did you have someone helping you in the process? And looking back, if you didn't, would you recommend it?
The draw was when my husband and I lived in Vietnam before we had kids. We went on this trip to Thailand and it was just magical. We just loved it. I still love Thailand. I mean, I would go back there in a second. It's beautiful, but living in a place is very different than
Mm,
traveling for like a week or two. And it just ended up being a lot trickier to live there. The main reason being, my kids just got so sick, so much. We were just in the hospital all the time.
mm.
Just the new viruses, and we got really horrible food poisoning. We were all hospitalized. Three of us were hospitalized within the first 2 weeks of moving. It was just
Oh.
like every bad thing happened. As far as I did not know that immigration attorneys existed when we moved there. 100%, I would have hired an immigration attorney if I had known that was an option. Um, Moving to Portugal, we hired a relocation agency that included an immigration attorney. Um, Again, 10 out of 10 would have done that for Thailand if I knew that was a thing. But we just didn't know that option existed. I did hire an assistant locally to help me. Basically, I hired her to scout schools and neighborhoods for us.
Hmm.
So I had her create a spreadsheet for me of different school options, help me understand the best part of the island to live in. Um, and that was really helpful because we knew when we moved there actually the exact neighborhood that we wanted to live in. So even though I have actually all four places that we moved, we never actually visited that location before going before moving there. I had never been to Phuket when we moved there. Um, I had been to a different island way far away from there. And so this is a little thematic for us, but I did have an assistant that created a spreadsheet. We'd done tons of research. We knew the schools that we wanted to look at. We were pretty sure we knew which school we wanted my daughter to go to. We knew the neighborhood we wanted to live in. So we did a ton of research, but it's also research only takes you so far.
Sure. I'm fascinated because I've never heard of that, hiring an assistant in an area to do all that research for you. How did you find that person, and what gave you that idea?
I wish I remembered how I found her. I'm sure it was some kind of I think at the time there was some kind of website where you could hire assistants in different regions. I honestly have
Oh.
no idea what that I'm sure that many of those exist now. But I found her through one of those and they had like ID verification as part of their service. So it was a legitimate person that was in the area. Um, and that was really helpful. I think I thought of it because I had an assistant in Boise and I was like, how am I ever going to do? I just knew there was no way I would be able to do the research that I needed without help. And, this was 2018. So I know it's not that long ago, but it's long enough ago that like it wasn't the YouTube access. It just
Mhm.
wasn't you couldn't find information. So this felt like the only real way. And then a lot of people that are considering these moves, you'll find if you're looking at a developing country especially, there's not like a website that lists all the schools. I mean, and if there is, it's outdated and the links are broken. It still is that way. Even in Portugal, when you're looking at schools and you can't find a good list of schools, it's just tough. You really need a local knowledge to really get like that granular plan.
Mhm.
So we had like at least a basis of what we wanted and then enough information to feel confident with making the move. But still in hindsight, I'm like, wow, we made so many rookie mistakes. I think number one, just assuming we could do the immigration process by ourselves. Like, please don't do that. There's no reason to
Mhm.
It's not wise, actually, I think, in a brand new country where you don't speak the language to try to do it all on your own. You're just bound to make mistakes and cost money, time, and maybe the ability to stay.
Yeah. What are some other rookie mistakes you think that you made along the way that you could help others kind of avoid?
Not listening to people's negative feedback about places that I wanted to live. So, in the Dominican Republic, before we moved, I had a couple of people from the school that I was about to work at send me like warnings essentially of
Mm,
the school environment, not the kids. The kids were great. I adored them, but some of the leadership at the school, the safety concerns in the area, and I just was like, tra la la, it doesn't. Of course, this isn't correct. I just kind of kept. I was confirmation bias. I only looked at the things that confirmed what I wanted to know. I think I did a little bit of that with Thailand too, because it was such a deeply held dream my husband and I had formed all these years back. We talked about it for 8 years straight about this move. And so there was just I didn't do a good job of seeking information that would challenge my view of the place. And so that led to hardship, and it led to, I mean, in the Dominican Republic, we were held up at gunpoint. My husband was chased by a gang like at 10 p.m. at night through a park. I mean, there were all these things that happened to us while we were there. Thailand, we were in a lot of situations that were really difficult. And like, it's not to say anything about the places. I loved living in the Dominican Republic. I have very fond memories about my time there. We did amazing, had so many adventures. It was a really formative time for me. Thailand, we made great memories together as a family, but it's just really easy to read the articles that are talking about how great things are and to ignore the things that detail the potential challenges or the warnings that you might come across. But no country is perfect. No place is ever going to meet every single need you have. You will have challenges. It's just life. It's part of being a human on the planet.
yeah. So you're in Thailand and you're looking to move other places. Did you research other options besides Spain and Portugal, or was it down to those two?
Yeah, I think we kind of looked at New Zealand. I think that was interesting to us. I mean, it's amazing. Of course, that'd be incredible to live there. We looked at other places in Asia. I was interested in going to Singapore, but my husband wasn't interested in living there. But I think, I mean, it just Spain is where we really wanted to move. It was just immediate, felt like it checked all the boxes. But the I know some things have changed now, but at the time, I would have had to open my business, like open a new business in Spain to legally
Mhm.
be there. And the bureaucracy and the tax penalty, like the amount of tax that we were going to pay there was just obscene compared to what we were paying in the US, which is pretty true across Europe unless you're on one of the special visas like I'm on now in Portugal. I say that, of course, there's a great social safety net and there's reasons for the taxes. So it's not to hate on Europe, but coming from Thailand and looking at the tax, it was just like, I do not want to step into that situation. So that was really the only reason we looked elsewhere because we really, really, really wanted to go to Spain. But Portugal is right next door, and a lot of like at the time, there was a lot of YouTube videos that you'd watch one on Spain, and then Portugal would come up as a next suggestion. So we just kept kind of getting nudged that direction, and so that's why we were interested in that.
Okay. So at what point did you pivot your career? So you and your husband were both educators, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Is your husband still an educator? Is he still? No.
He's been
So at what
home, a stay-at-home dad since my daughter was born, yeah, since
Oh,
she's
wonderful.
12 now, so 12 years.
Okay. And so
Mhm.
so you pivoted your career into coaching and writing actually. Um, tell me a little bit about that and how that has steered where you as a family have gone.
Oh, man. Oh, it's so interesting to think about because I do feel, I mean, any career has so many, it's not just like a straight thing. There's so many changes and twists and turns and adjustments. So I started my business as a side hustle in the Dominican Republic. And I tried to be a travel writer, quickly learned that was not a great way to earn a living. Then we moved to Vietnam, and I really leaned in and got my first opportunity ghostwriting part of an ebook while I was living in Vietnam. Then we came back to the US, back to Boise for a transition before graduate school. And I told my then fiance, now husband, I was like, I don't want to get a job. I'm just going to lean into my business. I had a graduate assistantship, so I knew I had some income coming in on the other side if the business didn't work out. So I started editing books. And I did that like I had already done some editing before, but I got my first real opportunity with a publisher. And I basically just edited my face off that whole summer. I mean, just constantly working, working, working. We also got married that summer. And along the way, I also was the founding managing editor of a regional magazine in that was out of Boise. And also, like, there's just so many things happening at that time. But I started working with a client that I eventually did a lot of work for, including becoming, this is a few years later, executive editor of Sam's Club's magazine. So we had about 11 million readers. I ghost wrote for one of those two clients. He was a Nobel Prize winner in medicine. I did that for about 4 years, wrote a book for him, I estimate about 800 pieces of content for him and his business partner. Um, so I did a lot of writing. I was editing books. I was working in magazines. I was getting my graduate degree. It was a lot, just a lot going on in that period. And then I got my first book deal. And I wrote a book on book editing that came out a couple months after my daughter was born. And and then around that same time, I ghost wrote a book. So I was kind of transitioning from editing into ghostwriting. And then I ghost wrote for several years after that. And then I kind of overlapped coaching with ghostwriting and then moved into coaching. I still do ghostwrite sometimes, but it's really only very select projects. And then I've also had another book come out that I co-authored. So it's been like, it was like tried to be a travel writer, got into editing, magazine world, ghostwriting, coaching, and then growing a team, which is today I have an absolutely amazing team that helps facilitate the work that we do. I have a program that I guide authors through the process of writing their books. That's like, you know, a really long window of time. Um, but certainly it's been, I started my business with a mindset of location independence. That
Mm,
was the foundation of every business decision I've ever made has had to align with being location independent. And even when we lived in Idaho for those 8 years, or well, we were in Ohio for graduate school in Idaho. Um, I always grew I didn't grow my business in the place we were in. It was always outside because I knew if I focused on my local market, I would get tied to my local market. So it's always been this mindset of build something I can move with, build something that can come with me, and that can give us freedom and the ability to be where we want. And that was from the very start. And when I started my business back in 2009, nobody was doing that. So it was like
Yeah.
uncharted waters, really new.
Yeah. I think that's such a smart strategy. And so many people now are kind of feeling locked into, this was my path. It's very linear. I'm in corporate. I don't have options. Do you have tips for someone who maybe has a lot of experience in a job or a career path, but really wants to start saying, I'd rather build something to be more location independent so that I can 1, 2, 3 years down the line move abroad? Do you have any tips for them?
Well, I think somebody who's in an established career is in a way better spot than I was because I was starting my business and also learning my skill at the same time. And
Mm,
so to be able to come from a place of expertise and success, any kind of success, whatever that looks like, I think is incredible. It's actually a real bonus instead of, I think sometimes people go, oh, well, I didn't start my business back, 10 years ago. And it's like, but you've been developing your knowledge and life experience. That's amazing. What an incredible place to start from. I think first shifting that mindset. Also, I actually specialize in working with people like this through the book writing process. So a lot of people that I work with, they are writing their books as part of their transition. So it's
Mm,
either, maybe transitioning from corporate into their own personal impact. Sometimes they're staying in corporate, but they want to build out something that's meaningful to them, like nonprofit work or some kind of personal mission. Some people are using a book as their pivot point to launch something. And if I just take the journey of a book and we just put aside the actual book writing for a second, that deep introspection and really deeply understanding your vision and uh, crafting, like starting there and then building the rest of it to support that, I think is everything. And then I think the other thing, and maybe this is true for men and women, but I think for women maybe even a little more. Um, just really like investing in yourself and believing in your
mm,
capacity and knowing that there is no age that's too late to go do something like this. You are completely capable at any point in your life to do something huge or even small. Like you can take baby steps, and that could look like, starting a side hustle and starting to build something slowly, or if you have the financial means, taking a sabbatical and really leaning into whatever the thing is you want to build. But I do think a lot of it is really like mindset and belief. But then if you are building something, I would say, and this is not something I offer, but like join a program, get a coach, like why struggle through it? Get somebody that can at least give you the foundational piece to learn, and then you can go from there. It can
yeah,
really, I mean, that's been huge for me at different points, is investing in coaching has made a
Yeah.
really big difference.
I totally agree. I think that's a great point. And I think, going back to what you touched on earlier is I think people underestimate their skill set and undersell themselves like, oh, I've just been, whatever their job is. I've just been, accounts payable for my whole life. Well, there's a whole skill set around that you don't realize that you've learned and you've become an expert at that can be applicable to many different things. It doesn't have to be just in this one kind of tunnel vision or fit into this nice easy box. But I think there's so many resources out there that there have been others in your shoes with that same career that have pivoted and done different things. And I think that's such important. Seek out others who can show you by example, whether they're a coach or not, but they've done something in their life and they've completely changed it. I kind of like to use this podcast as showing examples for
I was
people that
thinking that, yeah, it's
there's
like
other ways to do things. There's so many different stories out there to show. And if there's one little thing that you take away from it, it's like, oh, I never even thought of that. Maybe I could do this. I think that's such an important point. So thank
I
you for
love
sharing that. I
that.
think that's going to be a valuable little nugget.
I love that, and I love your point about, like, okay, you're coming from accounts payable, but I also think if you take your industry and you think about where you can niche and really
hmm
stand out, that makes a huge difference as well. So getting super clear, and a lot of times that's also aligning with the vision that you have for your life and attracting those kind of clients and those kind of people into the work that you do.
Yep.
Because sometimes it can feel really overwhelming to jump out and go, okay, I'm just going to build this business and serve whoever comes in the door. It's way easier if you get really clear on who's the person that you are like would love to work with, that you're best suited for. It's just like in the book writing process. I'm always pushing people to pick their one reader. Who is that one reader? Give them a name, a job, like what keeps them up at night, what gets them out of bed in the morning. Like getting really clear, and that can help you develop a more robust sense of the business that you want to create that will give you that independence that you're craving.
Yeah, definitely. And I never even really kind of connected those two things together. Like, when it's like book writing. Oh, it feels like such a massive. It feels like a monster, right? Like people are like, oh, I don't have anything to say or I don't have anything to contribute. But there are the how you help people tell a story in relation to a career path or whatever is really pivotal. It doesn't have to be, like a novel or, that's what I have in my mind, and probably a lot of people do. So what are the other types of things, like, as far as when you help people kind of figure out the path of writing a book, what are some tips that you have for people to kind of narrow it down?
Mm. Well, I think, first of all, I always encourage people to put time into the outline. So there's this, Hollywood has told us that writing just comes magically.
I
Like,
know.
I always think of Love Actually. I don't anybody who's seen that movie, and he's like in front of this beautiful lake, and he's on his typewriter, and just like the book is coming out. That is just not for most people. 99.9% of writers, that is not how it happens. And actually, the book writing process is writing a book is accomplished through discipline and follow through. It's not your skill and your talent are way less important than your willingness to do the work. And part of doing the work is really getting clear on what that book is before you even start writing it. So, um, normally, when I take people through the ideation process, we start first with the book concept and we get a really good high level view of the book. And that includes the core message, that one reader that I mentioned. It's all of these details about the book that are kind of like the anchor for the book as you write it. That comes about through an iterative process. It's not like you just sit down and write it. I guide them through several steps to get there. And then we build a really detailed outline that's the roadmap for the book writing process. And usually that's 15 to 30 pages, which a lot of times when I say that, people are like, what? And there's this really well known abandonment point in publishing of 20,000 words. The average
Mm,
nonfiction book is about 50,000 words. So it's like just before the halfway point, people are done. They're like, forget it.
mm.
So the goal of all of this is to create such a great map that by the time you sit down to write, it can just pour out of you. And then when you inevitably get tired or stuck, as writers are wont to do, you can go to your outline and it will help you move through that, help you, find it all the way to the finish line. But the other thing that I would say for anybody considering writing a book is to like anybody you see online that's like write your book in 30 days, get it to market in 60 days, like please ignore them because you likely have had a goal to write a book for months, years, maybe even your whole life. So, what is the rush? I think that a lot of the rush comes from a feeling of fear of failure. So, it's like if I just get in and do it really, really fast, I'll just get it done. And rather than I trust myself to go into this process, engage fully into this, what can be a really transformative, introspective journey that creates a better, clearer, more confident person on the other side that's more anchored, clearer language, and really feels like I created the best thing I could. That's what I want people to move into the process with. It's interesting as I say that I've never made the connection, but there's aspects of that that connect to moving abroad too, because you can just kind of like up and go, or you can, kind of do the research, make the plans and really like set yourself up for success. I think especially when you have a family, you kind of have to do the latter. Um, but I do think that that book writing journey is a really beautiful and incredible process, and I want to evangelize that to more people because I think, um, there is so much value in the journey itself and not just in the destination of being able to call yourself an author.
I think that's a good segue into kind of setting yourself up for success when moving abroad. So let's talk
Sure.
a little bit about your last move. I won't say your final move because obviously you've already said that once the kids are grown, you probably want to kind of see more countries as well. But so talk to me a little bit about how you approached Portugal, and what it has been like transitioning to Portugal.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we hired an immigration company, a relocation company. Mainly they helped us with our like paperwork and stuff. They didn't
Mhm.
do a lot of other things for us, but I know they also offer like housing services and things like that. That was everything. We needed it. And I remember when we went to our first immigration appointment in Lisbon. Um, our attorney goes, "If you hear me yelling, everything's fine." I was like, "Okay, I'm really glad I have you." So I was just glad to have that help. Um, I made a spreadsheet of all of the schools in the major regional pockets that we were interested in looking at that I thought that were, within our budget for international school education that checked the box for where we would be living. We had a list of criteria when we were picking a country, and those criteria needed to carry over into the city. So for us, main things were great outdoor recreational activities. My husband's a cyclist. That was really important. Easy access to medical care. That turned out to not be as available as I thought in the Algarve where we live, which I can talk about later. Um, Strong international schools nearby, again, has become a challenge in the Algarve where we live. Again, happy to talk about that later. But these were all things that I was thinking about when we were moving. So we rented an Airbnb in Lisbon when we first moved. We went and got all of our visa stuff taken care of in a transitional period from Thailand to Portugal. We wanted to go straight, but we had to come back to the US because you have to go to an embassy there and like do everything. Um, so Anyway, so we got an Airbnb in Lisbon for a month, which was ended up being in a really rough part of Lisbon. And when our driver from the airport went to drop us off, he was like, "Are you sure you're supposed to go here?" So we actually ended up leaving early because my husband, he didn't get hurt, but some people like kind of like almost like it was 4 in the morning and they came and grabbed his bike and got in his face. So it was not a nice part of Lisbon. Lisbon in general is very nice. And we used that as a home base. We drove around to Porto. We drove around Lisbon and visited some different places. We drove to Cascais, which I know you had a guest on recently that's in the Cascais area. And we drove to the Algarve, which is where we ended up. We almost moved to Lisbon, but it ended up that the area that we were going to live in, if we lived in that area for housing, the budget that we had for housing, we would have been in like either an attached house or an apartment. And in the Algarve, we have a 3-story house here. So it just, lifestyle was better down here. We have more space. And we found a school that we really liked. So we kind of let the school dictate where we moved, but not entirely. We definitely
Mhm.
considered the surrounding area. Um, and then shortly after we moved, COVID hit because we moved in 2019 in September or August of 2019. So that was really weird, really difficult actually. But yeah, we were in I think a good part of the world to go through COVID.
Had you settled in the Algarve when COVID hit, or were you still moving
Yeah.
around, or did you
We
you had?
we moved down here in October, and I
Okay.
think we were into our house by then. So, yeah, we were settled and stuff, but it's funny, I often tell people that it takes about 2 years to really feel comfortable in a country, to feel like you really live there, you really understand it. Like, that seems to be the number for most people. And I would say the first 6 months is when you kinda start to feel somewhat like you have your sea legs, and so we just had made some friends and, like, had a rhythm for school and knew where to go out to eat, and then COVID hit, so it was really interesting navigating that in a new country.
So for people who aren't as familiar with the Algarve as maybe Porto, Lisbon, kind of the West Coast,
Mhm.
Algarve's down below. Tell me a little bit about the difference in the lifestyle down there and the weather and everything else.
Mm. Well, the Algarve is Europe's vacation destination. I mean, people come
Mhm.
from all over the world, especially the UK, other European countries, even Portugal, to our area because it is really known for its like holiday going. Lots of hotels, lots of tourism, ecotourism. So it's kind of known as the country down here. So, you have the city, you have Lisbon, and you have Porto. And even like Cascais is very much a city, whereas we live in a pretty small town. Most of the Algarve cities have tens of thousands of people rather than hundreds of thousands of people. There's a lot of very small villages that have a couple hundred people in them. And the challenge there's a lot of challenges down here, but the lifestyle is really beautiful. I mean, we have a dozen world-class beaches within 20 minutes of our house. I can run to the beach any day I want. It's really, really incredible. The challenge that a lot of people face in the Western Algarve compared to the Eastern Algarve, Eastern Algarve has a major private hospital, it has an airport, it has also a larger public hospital that's better staffed. It has IKEA, it has like a lot of those kind of things. The Western Algarve, oh, and I would say it also has a ton of international schools, but it's not as pretty. And the Western Algarve has no private hospital. There is one that's kind of, it is considered Western, but it's still like, if you live really far west, it's 45 minutes to, even a hospital that's not open on Sundays. You have to drive like, 30 to 40 minutes to get to a hospital. And pediatrics, there is no pediatrics after like 8 p.m. anywhere except for Faro, which is
Mm.
on the eastern side. And so that's a real challenge if you have a medical emergency, your kid's throwing up in the back seat, like has happened to me at 4 o'clock in the morning. We've had to call an ambulance. That was not a good experience because it took an hour to get to
Oh.
the emergency room. And then the other challenge in the Western Algarve is the secondary school options. So primary school is great. There are incredible, beautiful, like storybook primary schools, but a lot of parents, and I fall into this as well, you just don't really think about that, or you think it's going to be solved somehow. And now we're really in a place where we're a little stuck as my kids get older and what to do with their secondary options. And the public school system here can be really challenging. My daughter's in public school. Um, so that's a challenge for this region that you don't necessarily have in Lisbon or Porto. There are other challenges, just like any place. But the thing that is, for many of us, just outweighs all of that is it's just such a nice place to live. I mean, it's
Mm.
just the beauty is hard to even like put into words. The access to food, the air, the weather, the vibe, like people are just really calm. Everybody's like, how can you be mad like living in a place like this? So I think, yeah, there are a lot of things that we're still navigating and we're, you know, actively struggling with. But it's like, I think on the hierarchy of challenges we could be dealing with, like we would be back in Idaho, it doesn't feel as big as I feel like
Mhm.
these are reasonable challenges to navigate.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you for your honesty because I think like you touched on earlier, it's nice to have both sides of the coin, right? It's
Yeah.
not all roses everywhere you go, and there are challenges. No matter where you are, who you are, what your life circumstances are, there's going to be challenges. And I think it's important to highlight those as well. Um, how have how how has the adjustment been for the kids? You said your daughter's in public school. I know you also looked at international schools. Like what and have they gone to both? And what is the difference? And why did you choose the public schools?
hmm So my daughter's had an interesting educational journey because she started preschool in Idaho, then she went to a English French school in Thailand where she took French and Thai. Which was also like a very fancy private school, like go-kart track and everything, because it's Thailand, you can afford a lot there. And then she went to an international school it was a British international school that was very British, and love lots of British friends, love them, but the more traditional British schooling is yeah, I don't Americans think that Europeans are so advanced with education. My experience is that actually American education is more open and adaptive to a child's learning style than many
Mm.
European schools are. That's true here. I don't know how that is in other European countries. So we ended up moving from that school to another British international school, but with a very different approach to education. Lovely, incredible school. What happened is she aged out of that school, and the next step for that school was really far away, and it just wasn't working because it was like a 30 minutes, but it was like through this windy road, and I would get car sick even just going to pick her up, and she was getting car sick. And it was just too much for us.
Mm-hmm.
And and also a lot of, I'm sure you've had a lot of guests talk about this, but um, international schools don't always value language equally. And so she really didn't get the Portuguese education that we wanted for her. And knowing that, at the time she was 11, we're like almost past the age of her. I mean, her pronunciation is amazing. She sounds native, but her language skills are not where we wanted them to be. So we decided to put her in public, largely, almost exclusively for the language.
Yeah.
And our plan is to keep her there for 2 years, and then we'll move her back into the private system. And she was a participant in that decision. Like, we all visited the school together. She has a bunch of friends that came from her old school. So, but wow, that has been a real adjustment. The public school schedule is absolutely insane. Like, she'll have certain days that she goes to school for 2 hours in the afternoon, and other days that she goes to school from like 8 to 6:30 or 8:30 to 6:30, and sometimes she has like 3 or 4 hour breaks in the middle of the day. I mean, it's like unreal. For people that are used to like a normal schedule, it's very hard, and there's strikes. Anywhere in Europe, strikes happen all the time. So I'll be taking her to school and there's like no cars in the parking lot. We're like, "Oh no, it's a strike day again." So it's been very, very, very hard to get used to. And then also the style of education is very different. It's much more like kind of like old school, 80s, 90s kind of vibes. And so that's been kind of hard to get used to, but she's very adaptable and she's had a good attitude. And actually, even though some of the teachers seemed really strict or less willing to help in the beginning, actually have become really amazing
Mm.
supports for our family. And it has forced us. So my son went to a Portuguese Waldorf school for preschool and kindergarten, and we felt part of the community there. And then we kind of felt a little detached being just in the private system. So this has gotten us feeling more part of the community, because I've never wanted to just exist in an expat, bubble. That's never felt like, why would I do that? Like, I'm coming to this new country. I want to learn the language. I want friends that are Portuguese. I want to understand the customs and the culture. I want to go to the parades and understand the significance of it. So being part of the public school has really, really helped a lot with that. They even had like a Thanksgiving meal at the public school, which was really special for my daughter, um, and made her feel really welcome. And then my son is at that same, he went from the Waldorf, Portuguese Waldorf school into the same school my daughter went to in elementary. Um, so yeah, and then it's the secondary, it's so challenging because really the only international options are in the Eastern Algarve. Like, that's
Mm.
pretty much all there is, or they're in a different direction. So it's like a minimum of 30-minute commute. And at that point, you really have to think about relocating because it just kind of becomes untenable. It's not just the drive to school or the bus, but then birthday parties are over there, sports events are over there, parent meetings are over there. It's not really reasonable for a family to commute 30 to 60 minutes both ways. It just doesn't really work. So I'm still hoping some magic solution will come through for us. There's been talk of one of the schools moving to our area. We'll see. But, it is challenging. It has been a challenge for sure. But again, the primary system here is beautiful.
Yeah.
Have had really good experiences here.
Okay. What does your day-to-day life look like there?
I mean, it's interesting because I feel like in some ways it's very similar to what it was in the US, except for, like, not, because I live in Portugal, and I'm really good at creating space for rest and exercise. I time block my schedule really carefully. So I have very quiet, focused work mornings. I usually take a 2 hour lunch every day. And then I do a focused block of work in the afternoon, which is when we're talking right now in the afternoon. And I live by the ocean. So usually at least once a week, I run over to the ocean, and it's very centering for me to like just take in that big blue expansiveness. If I'm feeling anxious or overwhelmed, it like instantly calms me. My favorite part about living here, there's a lot of things. I think the access to nature, we hike a lot. We do a lot of outdoor, we cycle, I run. But I also love our food. Every Saturday I go and pick up our produce for the week from our farmer friend, and it's organic, it's fresh. We get our eggs from him. It's affordable. I mean, as my mom and I were chatting about egg prices recently, I think we're paying like five or 5.50 a dozen right now for, farm fresh organic eggs. And I mean, that's like at least half of what my mom is paying right now in Idaho.
Yeah.
So just having access to great fresh food, we eat a whole foods diet and we make our own ferments and everything from scratch. So that's been a journey. That was not the case when we moved here. But that has enabled us to live a really healthful lifestyle with our family. And I would say the other day-to-day thing I appreciate here is that in some ways, I feel like I know I mentioned the 80s and 90s earlier, but like childhood is still protected here in a
Mhm.
way that it's different. When I chat with, like, when we're back in the US or there's Americans that are traveling here and I interact with kids that are the same age as my children, they are so much older than my kids are. And there is really this like even like community effort to keep kids here. Um and also to really value their childhood freedom, uh, instead of overscheduling. And so that's allowed us, I think, as much as I try not to, I generally am not, I don't compare myself to other people, but it's natural when you're in an environment where everybody's doing one thing and you're not, um, to try to kind of match that. And that was starting to become an issue in the US. And just, we were never signing our kids up for stuff. And all my friends had like so many activities. And kids do stuff here, but it's more like surfing or, like, I don't know, it's not serious. And so that's been nice just to feel, the kids run around with the neighborhood kids and ride bikes all over. And, it just really feels like a safe place. And um, I feel like my kids are safe here, which
Yeah.
is huge
That
for
must
our day to day.
Yeah, must be so refreshing. Yeah. Um, I know we're getting close on time, so let's wrap up the final, well, two more questions. What would you tell anyone who has the dream of moving abroad, hasn't quite gotten there yet? What would you tell them?
It is so normal. It feels crazy and like the hugest thing ever, but then when you go and do it, you realize that tons and tons and tons of other people are doing the exact same thing. And it's like every other big thing you've ever accomplished in your life, just apply those same skills to this dream and you can accomplish it. It's really more about project management and bravery than anything else. Um, and it's normal. That was really surprising to me actually when I moved abroad. I was like, "Oh, I'm not that special. Everybody else is doing this too."
I love that. Let's normalize moving abroad, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love
Because
it.
it
That's like
is.
a bumper sticker.
And finally, where can people find you if they want to work with you, if they have, an idea and want to be coached through it to get their book out into the world? Tell us a little bit more about that and where they can find you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm on Instagram at Stacy Ennis, and my website is StacyEnnis.com. Also on LinkedIn. So feel free to, wherever you hang out, whether it's, want to email me through my website or DM me on Instagram or LinkedIn. I would love to hear it. Please let me know that you found me through this episode so that I can thank Shannon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I just want to highlight, that I feel like the best part of this episode is really I've had many other guests say, if it doesn't work out, that's okay. And you've shown by moving to different places in your lifetime, that it's okay to, it's not the forever destination, right? It's
Yeah.
okay to feel things out, to move to, if it doesn't work or if it doesn't feel right, you can pivot and go somewhere else. And I think you're such a great example of that, and thrive really anywhere that you're at. So thank you for sharing that. And I think it's going to be really enlightening for people, and inspirational as well. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Shannon. I loved our conversation. I hope this was really helpful for somebody that's considering, stepping into their big dream of moving abroad.
Me too.
And that's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening and spending some time with us. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Make sure to follow the show and leave a review. It will really help others find us. And if you're dreaming about a life abroad or already living it, I'd love to hear from you. You can connect with me on Instagram at bargainhomesabroad, or on our website, www.bargainhomesabroad.co. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and I'll see you back in the armchair soon. Bye-bye.